Okay, so welcome back. I'm hoping this might be the final part, but this certainly will be the penultimate episode of the series. I'm sure there's so much you can say about this stuff. I want to talk about escalation, and I want to talk about the dark spectrum, or the dark end of the spectrum of pornography, the darker end, perhaps I should say. Excuse me. But maybe I also want to briefly go full circle because this was prompted by the Momo thing, which I keep wanting to call Mofo. So forgive me if I call it Mofo by mistake. You can understand why I would make that leap. So it's kind of interesting because it's a kind of a scare, and these things have happened before. Not even just post internet. It's so easy to see how these things can happen post-internet with things going viral and the speed of communication, but they happened before the internet, similar things. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this. Well, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on all of it, really, but this bit in particular, that I think there are parallels to this in society and societies. And what I'm thinking of, things that the best example I can think of in sort of recent times would be the satanic panic. And I'm not exactly sure when that was. Perhaps somebody could let me know. I think it might have been over quite a long period. So ritual satanic abuse, and everybody, there are things that are, kind of lasting, enduring conspiracy theories, that will be around probably forever, like, Princess Diana's death, 9/11, moon landings, that kind of thing. And there are occasional kind of mass belief, a mass belief or a mass interest in some kind of sometimes quite hysterical, generally untrue thing. So I suppose it's that thing, they say you can fool all the people, you can fool some of the people all of the time, and all of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all of the people all of the time. So I suppose on some level, some of the time everybody gets fooled, and all of the time somebody gets fooled. So. I don't know if you remember the satanic panic, but people took it very seriously, and there were lots of allegations of ritual satanic abuse, and certainly child abuse is what has always happened and still happens on a major scale, sadly. But people were talking about it being very much among devil worshippers. And there was this great hysteria, this big conspiracy that was going on. And there are still some people that talk about this today, but back in the day, it was on the news. Everybody talked about this. It was a well-established kind of belief at the time. And then if you go further back into history, and I'm kind of thinking about not so much witches, witch burnings and witch hunts and witch executions, because there was a political side to that. But I'm thinking, not many people know this, but I believe it was the 17th century, there was a big, a period of werewolf frenzy in France. And people were burned as werewolves and tried for being werewolves and that kind of thing. And now too, in my I keep a very open mind about things, but I happen to be broadly of the belief that werewolves do not exist. Certainly not in the physical sense of people that turn into a wolf or a half man, half wolf beast. I think that's nonsense. I think there's some parallels, perhaps in kind of shamanic practice where people spirit travel, perhaps, or something like that. I'm not saying that there's no precedent, no small substance to this. But in this period in France, there was a firm belief, and church and state were aligned in this belief that there were werewolves at large, and they were kind of hunted down, and people were accused of being werewolves. Now, this probably must have started with something. I suspect it probably started with serial killers, actually. Because we think of the serial killers as a kind of relatively modern thing, but they've probably always been serial killers. So maybe somebody found some particularly kind of bloodied remains that looked like it was the work of an animal or something, or maybe somebody had been killed and then mauled by wolves afterwards. And there was this very strong belief in werewolves. People believed in it. So I think this Momo thing, obviously there's some substances, something's happened, something has gone on, somebody has done something really shitty, really, some really very nasty individual has been putting, things online to frighten children. I think that's clear. There's no, very seldom is there no smoke without fire. But I think with this Momo issue, there's a massive amount of smoke and a small amount of fire, thankfully. thank God, I'm very pleased about that. So that's just something that I wanted to just touch on really, and I guess as Momo is in the title, we did talk a bit about Momo. So back to something far more, like I say, far more serious, far more real. Not no speculation about whether this is real or not. This is at the touch of a button. Okay, so pornography. So the darker end of the pornography spectrum is, so there are lots of things, and you could so certainly I guess rape fantasy would be one. Though rape fantasy is quite controversial. Interestingly, that rape fantasy is often something that's that women have that. And I'm not going to get into this because it's a whole controversial issue, and women do not want to be raped. Okay, but rape fantasy is something that is sometimes enjoyed by women. Okay, so I think you have to be a bit careful with rape fantasy, is putting that on the dark side of this world. But I think some forms of rape fantasy certainly are, and it's certainly not something you want your children watching. So it's something to be held with extreme caution, I would say, really. And if you want to listen to an intelligent discussion of rape fantasy, then listen to Psychology in Seattle, their podcast. There's a professor and psychotherapist that talks about this, talks a lot about female fantasy and that kind of thing. But generally, rape fantasy, is I don't think it's a good thing to be around. Basically, I don't like it. I'm not comfortable with it. And then you get into things like bestiality, necromancy, not necromancy, necrophilia, and then of course child exploitation material. That's the term people are using, by the way, rather than child porn. Child exploitation material, which is kind of that they've made that change in the nomenclature to really bring home the nature of what it is now. How the fact that children are being exploited, it's not made out of nothing. Child pornography material is produced through child abuse. So these are kind of the darker end of the spectrum. Now, this is the really scary thing, okay? Because you might be somebody that's using internet porn. You might be somebody that's using very mainstream internet porn. Or you might be somebody that started with using mainstream internet porn and started to branch out and specialise in certain kinks and certain areas. Because that's what happens, okay? Because when you search for that one image, to finish on, you get more and more fussy. It's like the horse that wants gourmet polos. The horse wants merry mints now. So you start to kind of get more specialised in your interests. So somebody watches a lot of porn. So on a very, very simple level, somebody watches a lot of porn, they might find that they're drawn more towards blonde women, and then they start looking at blonde women, and then they start finding that there's a particular image of a woman that's quite short, and then they start looking at short women, and they'll look at women of restricted growth. And then they'll find that like a certain item of clothing, they like French knickers, so they go to French knickers. So it gets more and more specialised. So you start off, looking at all sorts, or looking at anything, and then you start looking, so eventually you end up with, getting very specialist in your tastes. So you like, very shorter than average height, blonde women wearing French knickers. Then you like something about the situation excites you, so you like very short blonde women in French knickers having sex on the top of precipices. And I'm being a bit absurd with this, but this is what happens as people get more and more specialist in their interest, and also because they to chase the same dopamine highs, it's just the same as with any other addiction. People begin to need more and more. So like I said, the frequency can increase, and so they can cross barriers like looking at pornography at work, things that they wouldn't normally do, and start to seek out more extreme images, as well as more specialised images, more extreme images. So what we are beginning to find is that people that don't have a natural paedophilic, necrophiliac or bestialistic interest, not people that would naturally draw to that, are beginning to look at those kinds of images. And these are the kind of people that if you trace back, if you spoke to them 5 years ago, they would be absolutely horrified if you told them that they would end up looking at child exploitation material. So this is the level of the escalation, scary, really scary stuff. This is what can happen. when you get into this stuff. So what can we do about it? Well, I think a big part of this is education, and education in two things: education in sex for young people, good sex education, and education in the dangers of pornography, which is what this video is. I think that's certainly part of it. And I think there are things that, you know, probably can be done to limit the access of pornography, or the accessibility of pornography. One idea that's come up is that, you know, people have to use a credit card to access it, even if it's free, because you know, children don't have credit cards by and large. I guess they can get access to them, so it's not foolproof. Nothing's foolproof. I kind of think that the porn industry should start to take some responsibility. It's a bit like the gambling industry. You know, there's a body within the gambling industry that self-regulates and makes recommendations, and you know, and you can say, oh, well, you know, gambling's unethical, blah blah blah. You can say all kinds of things, have all kinds of views, but actually, it's, you know, there are some really good measures that have been taken by the gambling industry to self-regulate. So I'm not, you know, I wouldn't say, you know, certainly let's not make porn illegal, because that will make it increase, and that will make it more and more criminalised, and more people will get exploited because it will be hidden and go underground. But I think the whole nature of porn, you know, should, I think we should tax it. I think it should be taxed, and you know, and I think certainly there should be pressure should be put on makers of pornography to reduce exploitation as much as is possible. And I guess with some forms of pornography, it's always going to be exploitative. And I think some of the messages that go along with it, the content needs to change. So things like gagging, money shot, that's the word I was looking for before. Gagging, money shots, kind of routine anal sex, misogyny, you know, kind of suggestions of aggression and violence. All these things, you know, these should be, you know, targeted, you know. And you know, one-up warnings. You have warnings on cigarette packets. You know, one-up warnings that, you know, these, you know, this. So when somebody accesses pornography, big warning comes out. This is that, you know, this does not reflect, you know, real life sex. You know, this is a fantasy created for people's gratification, and in no way kind of, you know, should this be seen as messages about reality? Maybe, you know. I'm hoping you'll have some, you know, some more ideas and some more thoughts on this. So please, you know, bang them in the comments. You know, I want to hear. So actually, I think we are in a place where we can finish this video. It's a slightly longer one, but we can, I think, conclude. Momo, here today, gone tomorrow. Horrible, yes. Should we be disgusted and upset about it? Yes. But we should be disgusted and upset far more about what's happening to our children and our young adults and grown people. Hope that's given you something to think about. Please like, please share, please subscribe. Please come over to my Patreon site. Please tell your friends about this video. Please put it on your Facebook and your Twitter. And let's get the word out, because sharing this information is going to save people from potentially decades of misery, and it's going to stop a kind of whole chain of, you know, one person harming another. So thank you for watching this. Rangi Marie.